Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of After the Snuff. It's me, your host, John Millsip, and today I am joined by our final juror, Julia, and our runner-up, Joseph. Hello, you two. How are you doing today?
I'm
Hey
doing well.
John, doing really well, thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'm very happy to have you here. I mean, we're at the end of the season. We finally get to break down everything. Don't have to worry about spoiling anything that's happened. We get to have a nice, open, flowing conversation today. And I think really what it comes down to it makes so much sense to have the two of you on After the Snuff at the same time because I think you were part of the major storyline of the post merge, being the only two people to win individual immunity throughout all of it. You were really driving votes throughout, and Joseph, you were one of the primary narrators this season. Julia, you were just the person on everyone's mind all season, no matter what. So I'm really excited to dive into your games. Before we get going, any quick instant reflections on watching the season back so far?
That was fun.
It was a real blast. I think it was a blast, but it was a blur. I feel like there was some times when I was watching back some of the episodes, and I don't remember saying the stuff that I did, especially some things like towards the end that were just fundamentally incorrect or incongruent to actually what I did.
Mhm.
So that was really interesting to reflect on that. But overall, I think we all had a really fun time and we really enjoyed the experience despite how quite intense it really was.
Absolutely. I got a text sometime during the finale was airing. It was like, "Oh my God, your jury speech." I said, "Oh God, I don't even remember what I said." Oh boy. Like it
That's
went by
yeah,
like
probably
that in real time.
has something to do with like the 12 hours of fatigue that built up at that point. Might have had something to do with the giant jug of Tito's you were drinking at that time. But alas, I mean, it's one of the most fired up jury speeches we've ever had. And quite frankly, Joseph, no offense, that was a lame duck jury up to that point. So really glad you did it. So we got a little bit of fire there in the end. But we have so much to go through before we get to the jury. Let's start at the beginning of the game.
Yeah,
Let's
start at
start
the beginning.
all the way back there, 10 episodes ago. Both of you new to DCP, definitely not new to the org world whatsoever, very experienced. So much so that, I mean, Richard's literally talking about having seen you in different orgs throughout his voyeurism that he puts onto the community. What was it like when you get in there? First off, you get the initial, here's 10 people, and then there are some returnees coming in, Julia.
Yeah. I think being someone who's played orgs in some sense for a while now, I think I was definitely less worried than others when it came to the fact having returnees. Even watching the last full length season where you guys did like the vets versus rookies and like those sorts of things, and everyone was so worried right away about these people who played orc so much. Didn't really phase me as much. I was more excited to have people who had a taste of this before, someone who is new to the whole DCP experience.
And Joseph, when you're coming in, because like Julia said, right, these are just people who have org experience. Yes, it's DCP specific org experience, but in the end, it is just org experience. Is there anything different from a returning player as someone like Julia who was mistaken as a returning player for most of the season?
Um, I think I have a similar sentiment to Julia that also being a previous org player, I kind of didn't have the initial reaction of like, oh, these people have played this before, they have a real kind of like advantage against me. Actually, I think for all of them it was a real disadvantage if we saw how the season kind of went, that it's not so much the fact that they were outed as a confirmed org player that they have done something before. It really put like a label on them, and that's something I guess one of the things I really tried to latch on or kind of like harp on at throughout the season, that they've come into this game with a label, and I saw that as a disadvantage for them and an advantage for everybody else that came in fresh, regardless of whether people like Richard had seen me on something before. And then I thankfully wasn't outed at the very first travel council that we went to, that I was technically, I guess you could say, a returnee as well. So I was happy to see it for my game, but I really don't think it was that great, particularly because there was only four of them. Maybe it was half and half. It might have been a bit more even, and it maybe didn't match so much. But I think that would have been a bit too much of a repeat of like the rookies versus vets that had been done before.
Well, as they're looking in here, I mean, the beginning of the game really started when the rules were originally put out. And Julia, you were one of two people on the season to actually find the clue within the rules to end up with the shot in the dark. You just want to talk about how you approached getting this rules document and making sure you had this shot in the dark at the beginning of the game?
Oh yeah, so the second you guys sent out that email, I read this and I go, okay, so there's an advantage here. The second I get it, I text McKenna, I text Alex, to give me my advantage, please. Didn't work. So I wake up, day of the game, text him again, didn't work. So I had it copy pasted, ready to go. The second we get on that Zoom, I text him McKenna, I want that advantage. Again, something that maybe my experience helped me with a bit, but you never know what's going to happen in Survivor. You always got to keep your eyes peeled. And I'm just glad I paid attention that day when you sent it out.
Well, and that is something that McKenna has mentioned previously when she's appeared on After the Snuff, is there were a lot of people in the cast who messaged about the advantage prior to the day starting, but it just turned out that you and Richard were the only two to do it after the game actually started.
It's
And
so obvious when you think about it, because I got the same like Stonewall reaction from them, and I'm like, oh, I must have like been the last person to mention them about it, and they can't say there's nothing here or something like that. So I didn't think to do what Julia or Richard did, which yeah, was a really smart and like thing to do. I guess I should have tried, but I just thought I'd missed out on it, to be honest.
well, and we see that happen again. And I think that is one of the things that we just have a habit to when it comes to advantages, right? And especially in the org community where advantages are, okay, everyone must have this. They're probably doing it. So when you get a message saying it's not here or anything that like isn't here's your advantage, you just assume someone else has it at that point. Because especially if you're very confident in that you know how to obtain the advantage. But it's these attempts to get it that can sometimes scare people off. And we even see that within the season later on at the Brien boot, where Brien mentions the speech bubble that McKenna has put up on her picture of Alex behind her, which was in fact an extra vote if somebody had gotten it and like read what it said on it. However, he tries to get it after the vote's already in. He tries to play it as an idol, and then nobody asks about it for the rest of the game. And I think that is one of those things that even, and it's really great having both of you here to discuss this, even as hardened org veterans, you miss these things in the game, especially if you don't know exactly how they're going to come. And sometimes it's just that persistence that ends up giving you those advantages.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's the saying that's kind of like missing the forest for the weeds or whatever that
Uh,
saying is.
and not being able to see the forest through the trees.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're tall, I guess, or all too encompassed in the kind of like the action and the things that might not be obvious to you or obvious to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a thing about like paying attention to detail, and that's what I put in my resume, but it's really kind of like being alive to, I guess, your surrounding in a game like this, especially one that's very like visual based. And this is like this 16-inch screen is what I'm just looking at for the next 14 hours. You
Mm-hmm.
can miss these kind of things. Like you have a French horn, but I don't know whether it's a picture or whether it's mounted on the wall. Like small things like that.
It is a painting. Actually, that is
It's
funny.
very, it's 3D. It looks like you've just
Oh,
like
thank you.
nailed a French horn onto the to your wall.
No, it's just a very, very well done painting, but has its DCP lore itself. Infamously, a question in the final immunity challenge of Exile Island, was about that picture of a French horn. However, let's get into a little bit more of the game. And Julia, we have to talk about this first vote on your original tribe, because I think it really kind of encapsulates how random a first vote in one of these minis are. You have about 20 minutes of competing in a challenge and then frantically talking to your tribe to figure out who's going to go. And we get Connor's proposal to flip a coin for the two people who happen to not be in the room at the time. What's going through your mind as you see this going on, having that experience of orgs and having gone through that first round before?
Yeah. At that point, I went, anyone but me sounds good. I've played a lot of long-term orgs, much less experience when it comes to a mini. And when you're playing these long-form orgs, it's like, okay, you usually meeting people, you're chatting for 2 days, you do the challenge, then you have a whole other day to come up with who you're voting out. So even though it's the first round, you have all this time to get to know people. Someone might not be active of this, but you have nothing to go on in that minute. I don't even know these people's names. I'm calling them like that guy with the hat because you're just going so fast. So at that point, you get a majority and someone seems confident in a name that's not you, I'm going with it.
And one of the things that we did see kind of come out of that, which I think really kind of played into how some of the votes happened later, was Logan's determination that, like, when you flip a coin, you kind of figure out who you want, and then he ends up voting Brien in that first vote, and it kind of ends up being a bit of a death knell for him as he, continues on, and it really, once we get that swap, things get a little awkward there because of it. But if you don't want that decision to go the way it's been decided on, is there any way to change the minds of those people, Joseph? Like, if you're in a group of 5 and they suggest someone and you're like, oh, I don't really want that person to go, can you change their minds? Is it too dangerous to attempt to change their mind?
I think as long as you can do it, because at this point you're really kind of like drawing at strings here, or clasping at straws, whatever that. I'll get all my sayings mixed up tonight. But if you can provide like one minuscule good reason that kind of outweighs another reason against this person, I think it's very easy to sway people this early in the actual piece.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, at this point, no one knows exactly what's going on, so why not try to put that pressure on and see kind of how far you can push it and how far you can make the stick bend before it actually breaks, right? Like, maybe that's something that people don't utilize enough in orgs, is like pushing for that tension to see how far you can go to set up later in the game. Speaking of, tension and stuff in a vote, let's go to your tribe here, Joseph, where obviously we kind of get this returnee incidental, like, shots fired at each other because of a Margaret's slip of the tongue saying Emily instead of Beth. From your perspective, because you didn't seem to be like terribly ingrained with either of them at this point, what's going through your mind as you see these two players? Like, you see Margret say Emily pretty confidently when she does say it, and then Emily's like counterfire. How are you navigating the situation?
Well, like this was quite early in the piece, and like you said, I really wasn't like, not that I wasn't unamazing with them, but like we just met and we haven't really formed like proper relationships either. So, both of them being returnees, it kind of, I really at that point didn't care. And I was on whoever's train had the most momentum to get into the tribal council station first. I was happy to jump on. And I think that it just ended up being Margaret. I was about to call her Meredith. Margaret. Yeah. Well, Margarita, as my little vote said.
Well, the other thing that we kind of see here, and it comes into play later on for you, Joseph. So, can you just talk about the dig site and how that was handled? I want to talk to each of you about it because, Joseph, obviously you give a clue you tell Ava where you find one, which leads Ava to the clue, which leads to her immunity idol. And Julia, you were in that weird tribal council where everyone was kind of revealing their spots at the beginning, and then that all blew up afterwards. So talk to me about the dig site and how you approached that in the game.
So my strategy to start off with was kind of not be the first person to talk about it. And I think our tribe, starting tribe, was mostly pretty hush hush about the dig site. I was like, okay, let's go dig. And we all went to our receptive corners of the room, turned
Mm.
around, put some like noise canceling headphones on, dug, found what we needed to find, come back, and we just didn't really talk about it. We all knew we were doing it, but we didn't really talk about it that much. But I saw it as a chance to not necessarily like an olive branch, but because you needed at least two, I found it a good thing to utilize, which I did with Ava, to build a bit more of a relationship built with a bit of kind of like trust in my net going out there. I knew I could only do that if I had found one of the spots, which I did. And luckily at that time she had found a spot as well. So I thought instead of sharing with like several people to try and curry several favors, I thought maybe this time it might be better. Maybe old Joseph would have done that, which is a bit messy. But I was like, no, I have to play a clean, less messy game for once. And that led me to wanting to share with like one particular person that I thought I could see myself working with quite some time, and hopefully, whether they found something or not, they'd see a benefit for them, and they're like, okay, I kind of trust Joseph. Or to the point where they're like, okay, I really trust Joseph. I'm going to tell him that I got the idol and we're really good, ride or die. So I thought I saw it as a really good relationship building tool, uh, as opposed to maybe some people saw it as a really kind of like approach it maybe a bit more selfishly, like it's my dig side. I'm only going to keep it to myself.
Right.
But information is really like key in these kinds of games, whether it's information about advantages, what people might have for advantages, or even just on other relationships. I thought I guess that's the way I used it or approached it.
Yeah, and Julia, you kind of had the opposite in your tribe, where everything was out in the open right away because of how that tribal council went down with David and Brien. So, how was the dig site approached for you in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think initially, my intention was to kind of play it like Joseph did. I think in the game of Survivor, like information is key. Information is your best weapon form of currency. So to be able to read how that first round went, um, feel who I wanted to move forward with, and then share what I've been finding would be a great way to set up bonds. But obviously, that first tribal kind of derailed that plan when David and Brien both spoke up, and then everyone started sharing theirs. And then it just became in my mind, okay, well, given how small this dig site is, realistically, multiple people are going to have two by the time we get to whenever the merge may be. I might as well just be honest about what I'm doing if I can, because I think it'll look worse at this point if I'm not. So game plan kind of shifted, unfortunately, but
Yeah, but I mean, speaking of information as this powerful weapon you can utilize in the game, Julia, of course, you have some information that no one has because you ended up getting this question advantage at the beginning of the game. And it gives you the option to ask a couple of things, right? You're given 6 different options of what you can ask. You can ask where a fossil is at the dig site, when the merge is. You can ask if a particular advantage is in the game. Is it going to be a final 2 or a final 3? What's the next challenge? And when is a round with no scramble time? So you can only use it once. And you end up using it to ask when the merge is. So talk to me about approaching this advantage and why you decided the timing of the merge was the most important information to gather.
yeah, absolutely. Going into that swap and the mechanics of it, I found myself in a pretty precarious situation numbers wise, especially with how Logan went out, finding that exact same configuration of people. I knew going into that fourth round, it was going to be a bit difficult to navigate. So I figured asking that question would give me a little bit more insight of how to approach the round. I felt like if the merge wasn't coming, I'd probably have to be a little bit more conservative.
Mm.
Um, try to keep my head down as much as possible. But knowing the merge was there right around the corner, I felt a little bit more emboldened to go, all right, I can try to take this into my own hands. Let's vote out Brien. Let's call it a day. Knowing that I just had to get to that next round and there'd be a shakeup.
Well, so if for some reason the swap or the second challenge happened a different way and your two tribes weren't like just the biggest losers ever and there was a bit more of a change up there, how would you have used this advantage?
Yeah, definitely. I think if I went back to tribal and we were with the other swap tribe, I definitely would have kept it myself. And the thing moving forward, and the thing that was most intriguing to me was which round was going to have no scramble time. Um, Seeing how that has played out in the past in DCP, I knew it's something that preferably I'd want to know ahead of time. It's so hard to plan votes in these games, but just to have some sort of idea and plan to go into that little bit of speaking time would have been really nice to have.
Well, we've talked about your situation in the swap where you got swapped to a tribe. You were the only member of your original tribe on this new tribe of four. However, we have these combined tribal councils, and Joseph, it's actually two members of your swap tribe that end up going home in these two rounds, or are the targets of these two rounds, I should say, where you have Logan being targeted and then you have Brien being targeted in the second one that leads to rocks. How is that? How do you approach that when you're the even split tribe, but everyone on this other tribe is also targeting the people on your new tribe?
Um, I think with the first vote, I kind of approach it like, who do I have to come home with when we have to go back to our singular tribe? And if it means that maybe someone on my original tribe who's not on my new tribe is one of the targets, then it's not completely detrimental to me because I don't have to go back and everyone has to explain everything to everyone and it's kind of like awkward or anything. So I think I felt like I wasn't that attached to Logan that went that first one to really kind of like go to bat for them, I guess.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to the second one, it actually kind of worked out well because we still kind of, I think, had okay numbers. And when me and Ava came in, original people like Emily just came straight to us and like, okay, who do you want to go? And we're like, Brien, because it's just going to be me and Ava left. And we felt
Mhm.
like because we had these good relationships with our original tribe, and they came to us and they just gave us the almost the decision making power to say who do you want to go? And me both and Ava were like, well, obviously Brien because it's only us two left, and like we and Ava kind of had to talk about. We really think like they can't just leave two of us on a tribe. That's just unfair. Like logistically, that doesn't make sense. If we make this happen, then we're like good for like at least merge. And that's kind of like how we approached that second vote as well. Didn't go to plan. And I think that was also one where I had like the set 11th hour epiphany of like, the math doesn't work, guys. The math doesn't work. And then I did nothing.
Well,
I
let,
stayed
let,
in the same
let's
vote.
talk about that because, like, you take the moment to tell
Thank you.
JB. Julia's super happy about it,
Yeah,
obviously, but you take that moment to mention it to JB, and it is literally right before tribal council.
yeah,
Like peek behind the curtain here. Tribal council happens a set number of minutes after those last confessionals are recorded, and it was literally like finished recording confessionals, go to the room, and you're like, JB, I think the math doesn't work. And then it's like, okay, you have to go to tribal council. But you didn't say anything at tribal council about it to prevent this rock draw. So why? Like, I think that's just the big question is why not just say something? I know it's a public forum and everything, but
yeah.
this is your life in the game on the line here.
I think because it was gonna kind of like I was worried that it was gonna explode everything that we had planned, even though the planning was wrong. Um, I felt like being if JB wasn't gonna do it, being the other JB, because
Of course,
no
yeah.
my last name is starts with B, confusing the whole game. Um, but yeah, there was a temptation to do it, and I really kind of like hesitated to say something, but I felt like there was a chance that Julie didn't have her shot in the dark and the numbers would work. And in the off case that it didn't, then it was what, a 1 in 5 chance. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I actually don't think the results are like terrible from a rocks draw perspective. And then as I was going through the motions of that, I realized like, oh, I was the only person that picked up that it's gonna tie. And then maybe if I leave it like that, I can explain to Brian, I can explain to Julia, hey, I kind of at the last minute put my neck out for you to make it draw so you guys were safe and I put my own game on the line because Rocks was going to happen. Well, that's at least how I tried to pitch it to Brian. Don't think it worked, but I tried. And I think realizing that also in the moment, I kind of was like, hey, there's a silver lining here that I could if I make through Rocks, there is something that I could use to I don't know, foster a different kind of relationship I had with someone that I didn't have beforehand and maybe have some more people on my side coming in to merge as well. So there was a lot that kind of happened in 10 minutes, thought process wise, 5 minutes that happened at tribal council that um, was a lot to consider. And I was like on the edge, on the cusp of like saying something, but I didn't. And I did what I did.
Well, Julia,
Julia's thing.
as one of the people in this split with your shot in the dark, which is ultimately also what causes rocks here, because if you don't use it, you just vote Brian out instead. That revelation moment from you as
Oh
you
my
see the
God.
votes getting read is probably one of the highlights of the season for me. The sheer like delight in your face, realizing that it's tied and neither you nor Brian is going home. What are you doing? Like, how is that being processed by you in the moment?
I was like, I think that's the best word. I was delighted. I was tickled. It was so because at the end of the day, if Brian just goes home, like I'm still happy. I'm
Mhm.
still fine. But it was just so delicious. Just going through a round and you're like, all right, it's me or you, and you know it, and everyone knows it. And you spend the whole time fighting against each other, but just to have it be someone else, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I wear my emotions on my face. I can't help it. It's who I am. I'm not able to conceal it. Just a little sly smile. So I was very tickled, very delighted when it happened.
And does a moment like that bond you with the person that you tie in the vote? Like in that instance where it is so obviously you or Brian going home, was there any chance of the two of you just like completely bonding and connecting at that point? I know you don't, but was there any thought process of that being an upside of this?
I think it would have been a connecting moment if it were anyone but Brian. Um, Brian and I have a long history together. I'm shocked we were put together at the beginning. Um, seen each other many, many times in these games. So it was a less of a, I think it was less of a bonding moment for both of us and like, oh shit, you still got to deal with me. I still got to deal with you sort of thing. Let's go. But was still happy nevertheless.
Well,
I
you
just want to
certainly.
give a quick shout out to Emily because I feel gutted for her, but she
Yes.
also made DCP history as well at
Yeah,
the same time. Oh,
it's unfortunate to get rocked out at the exact same spot in both of your seasons.
yeah.
But alas, it seems to be Emily's lot in life. We'll see if she's able to break it if she ever comes and plays for us again. But
I think she'll want to see the rules of the game beforehand about
yeah,
rocks.
Yeah.
absolutely, right?
A rock-free season. How about that?
Well, we get into the merge, and I have the two top competitors for individual immunity on the season here, and you started competing against each other right off the bat with this first endurance challenge we threw at you. You have these cups on, you have to hold them up against the wall with the ping pong ball. I don't think the viewers understand how long this challenge actually went on for.
hmm
How were you two feeling during this challenge? And especially because the clue goes out for the dig site at this point. What are you thinking about dropping for the clue, playing it out, having a dominating performance, and coming up just short, Julia? Like, what type of thought process is going in to how you approach individual immunity at this point?
Yeah, I think coming off that tribal, obviously had getting votes, surviving by skin of the teeth. Um, I was go, go, go. I'm going for this, regardless of what it is. I'm going to give it my full effort. Not going to try to hold back, bring down my threat level, which maybe I should have, but wanted to go for it. When it comes to the clue, I didn't even know it went out until I dropped.
Mhm.
I think if I had seen it as it came out, I think there's a very good chance I drop at that point. Um, but unfortunately, didn't see it until after the fact. But I'm glad I gave Joseph a run for his money.
Well, we definitely didn't expect that challenge to go that long.
Do you remember how long it actually like officially went for, John?
Let me double check here. I might be able to figure this out to see what our intervals were. Hmm, this one
'Cause I definitely
here.
like remember at least like either one of my shoulders or one of my feet going numb.
Well,
Yes.
for e- for every section, it was 2 minute intervals and then a 30-second transition period.
Okay.
So we're looking at 2 minutes 30. We start with 2 cups and we go up to 9. So it was a good like 15, 20 minutes that you were
Mm.
doing it for, which is
Okay.
really impressive. It's quite
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really fun challenge, and I think by the time I got to the fourth or fifth cup, I kind of like locked the fuck in and was
Mhm.
like, I've come so far. I'm not gonna like just
Yeah.
give up now or like drop. I didn't know that any clue was dropped at that as well. Like I was oblivious to the world around me, let alone in my room or on the screen, but like outside where I was living at the time as well. I had no concept of time at that point. I was just like concentrate, look at the wall,
You just
and
pick a point. You just pick
yeah,
a point and you just look at it
yeah,
and
and that's
go.
all I did. Yeah. It was really tough though. I really felt like I was on a real like survivor endurance challenge because any minute uh sway or slip of any of the cups whatsoever, the entire thing just falls to pieces. And we saw that that happened to several people,
Mhm.
especially in the transitions. And that last
Yeah.
one was really tough. I don't know really how one I made it through the transition, let alone get a position that was comfortable at the end there when we had to, I think it was put one finger
One
or
finger, yeah.
yeah, and I actually figured that a thumb being like a right angle. Oh, that happened so many times during the game as well, right? Like, oh no, Aaron's gone, and like balloons would go up past me. Oh no. I figured out that was like that seemed like the best. Instead of like doing like that, that
Mhm.
would much more harder. But it was really fun, and like I probably have the same kind of like slight regret that Julia has had about like lowering our threat level from a competition physical challenge bees perspective. That's definitely a choice. But I find like with my personality, doing that is really, really hard. I like to give it my all, and if I don't get something like really out of it, like I would, there was like a really high chance of me getting something else by dropping out, other than perceived threat level dropping,
Mhm.
I think it would be worth it. And we just kind of like gather momentum throughout merge, and it just gets worse for both of us.
It
Yeah,
worked out okay
yeah,
for the most
Yeah.
part.
for the most part. But so we get into this vote at the merge, and really what it is we kind of see our swap tribes are essentially working together at this point. And despite the fact that, technically they weren't two tribes, they acted like two tribes. And we see that Swapped Ardonics tribe really thought they could pull you in for this vote, Julia. But ultimately, you do decide to vote against Beth with that tribe you swapped with. And then it Brien switches over and does vote for JB, and then there's the two hinky votes on Beth, which or on Brien, which makes it so that we go to rocks anyways. So where were you thinking you were sitting at this point, Julia? And what ultimately made you decide to cast a vote for Beth here instead of switching with those people from your original tribe to vote for JB?
Yeah, I had no idea where I stood in the game at that point. I was in the weird position where it's like I don't really trust the swap tribe too much, but I was only with these original people for a bit too, so felt like I was in no man's land, kind of floating in the middle. I think I tried to have my cake and eat it too, which is something I am guilty of sometimes of like, okay, I'll like let's I'll vote Beth so I can still keep like these people around who I was originally with, but like I'm still letting JB know that he's getting votes and like I'm voting with you guys, it's okay. And ultimately like we lose Connor, which sucked for me, but just one of many rocks this season.
It is. And Joseph, what was the driving force behind you guys deciding on Beth as the vote there? Because Beth was the only person on that swapped Ardonics tribe most of you had any contact with prior to the merge.
Hmm. Um, I think it was not that much of a thought out strategy, of thinking that it's a quieter person that is a bit of an easier vote to get momentum for people to go behind. I think that was the main thing because there were a lot of quite large personalities in that merge where they could have been quite obvious threats, but I think some of us thought that a bit more of a quieter threat would mean that it could be easier to garner votes for. If
That makes sense.
I'm pretty sure that's how it went down. Yeah.
That makes sense. Of course, that's not how it goes down. And it goes down with this wild split vote that ends up with Connor going home in a rock draw. And then we get, quite realistically, the most decisive vote we have in the entire season. And still, four people managed to get votes at this tribal council when Erin goes home. And this is kind of one of those turning points, I feel, where there's a lot of talk about big targets going after each other. And both of you compete on the same grouping in this immunity challenge. In fact, you immediately decide to work together in this partnered up trio immunity challenge. And then Richard jumps in with you. It
Felt
kind
like
of
the
seems
theme of
like,
the season. Theme of the season, right?
yeah, exactly. But it kind of seems like at that point, you're just saying, ah, screw threats. Like, whatever. This target of a threat doesn't matter to me. It's here anyways. It's time to just go for it. Is that the approach? Like, how is there a point in the management of threat level where you become such a large threat, you become less of a threat again?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is 100% the case. And I think halfway through merge, I think that's kind of like where I stood on myself.
Mhm.
I think that it gets to the point that it's such an obvious threat. People start maybe over, I want to call it maybe a product of over strategizing where they think, wait, why should we go for such the most obvious person when at this point, when it's like mid-game, it's actually the really sneaky threats that are going to make it to the
Mhm.
end. Or lo and behold, Julie and me make it to the top four. Um, so maybe they should have like, you can take a seat back and maybe sometimes the biggest threat is the best choice. And I think people tend to really overanalyze the really, really big threats when they get to a huge threat level that from a physical standpoint that we did, and really take a step back and be like, maybe let's just keep it simple, stupid, as boring as that may be. But if we look at it from an objective point of view for our game, it might be the best option that we have at the moment, especially if the threat level during merge is so tied to winning individual immunity.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think what Joseph said, I was really worried about with Brien specifically of like Brien got votes in like three tribals in a row. And it got to the point where it's like, okay, well, if Brien, like, it's going to get to the point where people are just going to stop voting Brien,
Mhm.
even though he's like the flashing light. Like, they're going to stop doing it and do something else. And then he's going to keep going on and going on and having a story. And yeah, I think I said it at the tribal when I got asked the question, and I stand by it as like, I would much rather get to the end and have it be with the best people and go for it than go with people I think I can beat, but get voted out along the way trying.
Yeah, I mean, you can't win the game if you don't get to the end of the game.
Exactly.
It's physically impossible. It is the one thing we haven't figured out how to do in Survivor yet. Is not getting to the end of the game and somehow winning. Obviously, like Chris Underwood came close, but he did technically get back in the game, so doesn't count. But the most interesting thing that this final 9 Erin vote sparks here, dear Julia, is your habit of giving Ava votes. And speaking of like the sneaky threats kind of making their way through, this is the point where you're like, no, Ava is going to make it through this entire game and I have to get her out. What? How? Like, I don't even understand.
I'm the metagamer. Exactly. I don't know. I was over metagaming it. It was just, it got to the point, I'm like, fuck it. I'm not voting Erin. Like, I don't want to. I'm not going to do it. It's clear these people wanted Erin. Like, everyone wanted Erin to go. I'm like, I just don't want to do it. Who do I want to brand? Who do I want to have some eyes on? And like Joseph said, some people with the metagaming, oh, it's middle game. Let's look at the sneakier quiet threats. This is the one that needs to go. I said, I think Ava is in a really good spot. I think she has a lot of really close allies and she has people looking out for her. She had different relationships that like I wasn't really aware of, like her knowing Erin going into it. Even though Erin left, like that's someone on the jury. I just thought she was really well positioned and had a chance to make a really deep run. Said, he put some eyes on her. I don't think there are enough.
Well, it definitely put some eyes on her. It put her own eyes on her, really, as to why was she getting votes. And then it happened again, and for some reason, Ava managed to get 2 votes in that next vote where it's the quick round. Brien becomes like this easy target. And I think like one of the most eloquent turnarounds we have seen in a quick round came from you in this moment, Joseph, where Brien is trying to make this pitch that he doesn't have any advantage he can play at this point. There's no need to vote him out. And you just quickly say, guys, he literally just said he doesn't have an advantage. There's no danger in voting him out. So walk me through that, especially because Brian's going for you here. This is the first time Julia's won an individual immunity. It's the first time you are actually in danger at a tribal council in the merge.
Yeah, exactly. And to this point, Brien had actually been trying to work with me, or pretend to work with me. I don't know. And maybe it was just because he didn't have anything, which he didn't. Luckily, like you pointed out, he did point out the thing a bit too late. But what was I going? I lost my train of thought. I think he went on quite. Sorry. The point I'm trying to make is that because he knew he didn't have anything, he got quite not aggressive, but like on the offensive and really had to like point the target as one of the most obvious options, which at that point I agree, it probably was me. But I knew that this was kind of like my not a ride or die moment, but a sink or swim moment of like, can I defend myself here when I really like pushed up against the wall? And I really listened to everything that he said. And I kind of had the aha moment in that point to say he's literally just served himself up on a silver platter to say that he doesn't have anything. That's the easiest vote they're going to do this whole entire game. And he has nothing. And I think he kind of like, to speak in Rich's language of poker, it's like we haven't even got to the river card, which is the last card for people who don't understand poker. And he's already like put his cards up and he has like a 2 and a 3 that are not the same suit. And I've still got like my 2 pocket aces folded down. It's kind of like that's what he did. He kind of like gave all his cards away. And I just pointed that and made that a fact a lie to everybody else, and it seemed to work, or at least I hope it did. But I like to also think that at that point, some people also like had my back as well and were like, no, actually, even though Brien might have a good argument, I don't want to vote Joseph because I like work with him at this point and I want to keep him for a bit more.
Well, Julia, you didn't vote for either of them. You voted for Ava. So what was going through your mind in this round?
I got to the point where first Marge vote was kind of hinky. Connor went on rocks.
Mhm.
Then we had Erin go. And then I get to this point and it's pretty obvious. No, I don't want to say obvious, but it looked, at least to me, pretty decisively that Brien was going to be the one to go home. He
Mhm.
put up a fight, but I think optically, like his back against the wall, I knew he didn't have anything that could help him there. He's going home. I go, okay, I can vote Brien. Where does that really get me? I can vote Joseph. That gets me nowhere. Or, once again, I can just cause a little bit of chaos. I thought I was in a pretty precarious situation, my OG tribe getting knocked down. And even though next round she didn't go home, Meredith was in a prime position to almost go home as well. It was a pretty close vote. So I think like a little bit right there. So I said, might as well cause a little bit of chaos. I have immunity. It's what I came here to do, have a little bit of fun. So might as well.
Well, like you said, Meredith almost goes home in this next round because this is the third time we've gone to rocks this season. Second time we've gone to rocks on an odd number. Wild
Yeah.
for that to happen. Because there's just someone who's just not in the plan this time. And you survived that. Joseph, you're one of 3 people on the wheel this time around. And if you remember the tribal council on the wheel, you are the name that's like furthest away when it starts slowing down. What was that like for you in that moment? Just being like, there is a 1 in 3 chance I'm going home here.
Well, it was worse for me because I kept getting confused between Joseph and also JB that I sometimes get in
Right.
other areas of my life as well. So I think my brain was like, you have a 2 in 3 chance of going home. And then it landed on JB, and I like legit thought for a whole 5 seconds that it was me. And then I hear JB go, no! I was like, oh, actually, my name's Joseph. That's okay. And I think right before that, every person that had gold rocks was on the color blue.
Mm.
Um, and I was like, oh God, guys, I'm on blue. It's gonna be me. And then they do the last switch and I get switched off blue. And I think either JB was yellow or he was blue
Hmm.
and it went on him. And I was like, see, I told you so. It's always blue.
It
But
should have been Richard.
I think because I'd won 1 or 2 immunities by that point, I was like, look, I'm happy to make it a jury at this point. I've had fun, guys. I wasn't like really like super anxious that it could be me because I kind of like came to terms a little bit as well that I've had a fun run and it's been a good run. I tried. It's just how the game goes. So I wasn't like shitting bricks either, but it was like a little like it was more fun, nervous, like waiting in line to go on a roller coaster kind of nervous as opposed to like
Right.
receiving bad news kind of nervous because you know it's coming.
Right. Okay. Well, we're in a stretch now here where I just want to say, like, this is the stretch of the game where I'm not 100% sure what goes down with these votes. So I'm going to
Join
need
the
some
club.
clarity for both of you. Because final 6, which is where Meredith goes, you two are gunning for Ava this round, but it doesn't seem like you tell anyone who can have any influence on making sure Ava's actually the one to go home this round.
Ugh.
So, Julia,
I
tell
know.
me, come on, break it down for me. What was going on in this round, and how did we get a 3-2-1 here?
The tension, it felt like, tensions throughout the day. Like, but it was like lighthearted, even at like more escalated moments. I think it was, I don't know what happened that round. I don't know what got put in the water, but it felt like the intensity, the tension, I could just slice it with a knife. I felt like the conversations, and again, I don't think attacking is the right word, but they got so much more pointed when we were having these conversations. And uh, I feel like I can't even break down what was running through my mind because I don't even know, bouncing from room to room and having these conversations. You're coming up with like 4 different stories. You're trying to placate everyone, and this round we didn't go to rocks, and it was the most hot damn mess of all of them to me.
Was part of that brought on by the fact that you knew there was a legacy advantage out there, and obviously Richard has claimed it at this point and been like, yes, Brien gave me the legacy advantage. Did that add to this chaos, Joseph?
Uh, Not necessarily because like we all kind of knew that he had it, so it was just like his name was off the table, really.
Hmm.
I think for me this round, I kind of got a little bit of big move-itis
Okay.
um, for Ava. And I was like, I really don't think I've done really that much this merge other than like win some immunity hours, and I'd like a big thing under my belt. And I was like, maybe I can like throw one of my closest allies under the bus, and that'll be great for my resume. And I wasn't really thinking about jury management at that time. Almost the game, it seems like. And it was just like Julie said, a bit of a hot mess. And like to this day, it's still a bit of a blur. But I know that Meredith was also coming for me at
Hmm.
that point as well. And I was just kind of like trying to replicate the kind of emotional stance I was in when Ryan was coming for me. But she definitely held a bit more of a cards close to her chest than Brian did. So it was a bit more of a covert operation that somehow worked.
Hmm.
But if it's kind of like you get points for solving the math equation, but the I just used an eraser for like the working out, and we missed all of those points. Like we got to the conclusion that we wanted to do. How did we get there? I don't know. It just magically happened. And yeah, 3-2-1 at 6. That was not a meticulously orchestrated 3-2-1.
Hmm.
It's definitely more entertaining than say like someone that planned a 3-2-1, even though that might be
Yeah.
like a oh thing. It definitely was it made it much more entertaining for people that were watching what hot mess that was.
Yeah, it certainly feels more like a Borneo merge vote than it
Oh,
does a Panama Final Six vote.
Hmm.
Now, the other thing that happens in this round here, Julia, you end up getting an immunity idol. And that's because McKenna and Alex changed their name to do a jumping jack. I think that's what it was. Something along those lines. And anyone who did a full jumping jack during the challenge got a clue to the hidden immunity idol. And we see you do it as you're working on the puzzle, especially because you flew through that puzzle and we had to keep you in that room to not show how fast you finished that puzzle.
That was the connections one, wasn't
That
it?
was the connection or
Oh,
the
yeah, that was a fun one.
yeah, the what is it? Not connections, the other New
the
York Times
strands.
puzzle. Yeah, the
Oh,
strands.
Fran, sorry.
Strands
Yeah.
puzzle. But both of you actually did quite well at that one.
I
Uh
mean,
Thank you, New York Times.
yeah, come on.
well, Joseph, you end up winning this one, which also wins you your second reward of the season too.
Did I?
Uh, you did. You did win this challenge.
I
No,
won.
no,
Oh.
Julia won this one. You won the next one. I'm confusing things
I
at
did.
this point. It's
They
fine.
get so hard. They all blur together at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
So okay, we're like 6 weeks into this now. It's really confusing, but it's all blending together for me too. But yeah, so you both do really quite well at this, especially when we see like some of the other people we see. Obviously, we saw Ava struggling with the plural of dinosaur, and Richard couldn't really grasp how the puzzle worked at all. And Julia, you do your jumping jack in the puzzle room, whereas the others are doing it in that room with the four of them to try and get it.
That was
How did you
fun.
notice it? Like, how did you notice it quickly enough? And how, because you were so decisive on how to do it. And you did it and you got it. And the one thing that you did do was you hung back after the challenge in order to claim this idol. And that could have been a very risky thing to do. But did the fact that you had already won individual immunity just make it easier for you to do?
Oh yeah, it definitely emboldened me because at that point we're at final six. I'm assuming the idol is good until five. So like, okay, I'm good here. I'm get this. I'm good at five. We're assuming based on the numbers it's going to be a final three. I got to get through one more vote. Got to win one immunity. I got to do one thing. I'd rather hang back and try to figure this out, miss a little bit of scramble time, maybe add a bit more to my growing target and get this idol than go have a little bit more talks with people. And I'm glad I did it. God. Yeah, just
Well,
always pay attention. If
yeah,
anyone plays DCP in the future, just always watch.
always. Always be looking because you never know when a clue is going to come up. And I mean, it happens a lot. You got to pay attention to production names because those are those things that you are going to tune out so much because they're always there. And then the moment they change, if you're not paying attention, it's probably too late because someone else has already got it. But you got to
Exactly.
keep trying for it because someone else might not have gotten it. We then get into Final Five, and Final Five obviously very chaotic vote. We have Ava going home here as the only person eligible to go home here. Joseph, you have immunity. Julia, you have an idol. But I am confused because, like, the main push throughout this entire round that seems to be gathering steam is we cannot let this duo of Richard and Beth get to Final Four together. But you two vote separately. Like, Joseph, you vote for Beth. Julia, you vote for Richard. Like, where, how? How do you not get on the same page on who to vote out here? Especially, Julia, you know where the idol is.
Yeah.
So,
About
Joseph, like, talk us through this vote. Like, how did you not get on the same page?
that. To be honest, I don't know. I think there wasn't a final like confirmation communication. I think there was a real understanding of like it's either Beth or Richard. That's fine. Um, but we never like double back and we're like, okay, you're doing this, I'm doing this. Are we both voting this? Or we never really had like that kind of like, I guess, final conversation. And it was a big mistake, I think. Or was it? I don't know.
Well, they're two of the final three, so I would say it's probably a big mistake.
Oh.
Well, when I think about it, actually, I think having Ava go out there as opposed to, I don't know, it's like a butterfly effect
But
kind of
yeah,
thing.
that's
Like,
fair.
coulda,
That,
shoulda,
that, that that's a
woulda.
good point. That is a good point. And
Yeah.
I
Julia has been trying to get Ava out the entire game, and it just turns out that the time she doesn't vote for Ava is the time she gets her out.
yeah. I do I think I get where like Joseph is getting at. And at the end of the day, I think regardless of who went there, if we say it's Richard and it plays out the exact same way in Ava sitting there, I think she is a major jury threat who has a great chance at winning the game. Like if she gets to the end. So I think at that point, looking back at it, I think in the moment felt like a really huge mistake. I think looking back at it and knowing how the season played out this way, I still think it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of
Mhm.
situation.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think it just poses a new complication for when you do get the final four,
Yeah.
which we have to talk about, Joseph.
Oh
You
yeah.
know we have to talk about this because you decide to let Julia go into fire making here by voting for Richard with her.
Hmm.
So walk us, and you get chastised for it at Final Tribal Council.
Yeah. So and it's funny because like at the start of the round, I'm saying sending to the fire would be stupid. That would just be like another notch on their belt that they made it to the end, blah 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 blah. But I think it wasn't, I think, something I did to, and it didn't impress the jury, at least for my game.
Mhm.
But I think sometimes when I've played these games, I've been um a bit afraid of like really committing to my allies. Not in a sense that I leave myself a door open
Mhm.
to backstab them or anything like that, but I tend to like be a little like standoffish and I never really like, well, ride or die. A bit like uncommittal like that. But when I promised Julia that I said, I promise to send you to fire. I was like, you know what? we've been working really well and we've been neck and neck this whole season. I really like, and I feel like she deserves, in my mind, I formed the view several iterations later that she deserved a spot, at least to try to earn her spot in the final tribal council. And that could have been like a death knell to a unanimous vote for Julia, which could well have happened. But I felt like because I said that to Julia, I owed it to her, and it was more of a decision for not to say it was selfish, but like for me to prove to myself that I kind of like can be a loyal person. I don't know.
I think there's a
And
lot
like,
of respect in that. I think that
yeah,
deserves a
it
lot
was
of
more of
respect.
a nod in respect to Julia's game than me thinking if I said this and I didn't do it, then maybe she might not vote for me because I just flat out lied to her. That wasn't really like a consideration that I had. It was more of a respect to Julia's game. And I said what I said I was going to do, and it's like the final four where everything's kind of like under a microscope from everybody watching, especially for the jury as well. And I knew it was a risk, and I knew it was a gamble, and I didn't I was actually pretty confident that Julia would beat Richard, to be
Yeah,
honest.
me too. Me
I
too.
well, I mean, let's talk about that now. Julia. Julia, you are an org veteran.
Give me the
You
tawny question. Come
you're
on, give it to
you're
me.
a college student. How the hell did you lose Extreme Flip Cup?
I know. I was really good at Flip Cup in the beginning, when we did that second merge challenge.
And
I'd
Richard
like to
was
say me being
terrible.
a it is really bad. Me being a college student does not. I've been to one frat and one frat party in my entirety of the 4 years here. God, I don't know what happened. I don't know if I was lethargic from the Chick-fil-A, if the 14 hours was just getting to me, but I just don't have the clutch coursing through my veins anymore. Like I guess I'm losing my edge, but yeah, it definitely sucked. But I think it definitely sucked less than it would if I had been playing this game for 20 something days.
Mhm.
And it more I lost him it. Fuck, that really sucked. I was like, you know what? This was fun. I'm good.
And I think
Good.
I was kind of like looking back to the season and like how chaotic it was,
Mhm.
especially with all the rock draws and the tied votes and how messy some rounds were. I was like, what's like I think the entertainer in me was kind of like, what's like this would be the cherry on top of an amazing season that
Oh
it
yeah.
unexpectedly goes to fire when people think it's probably the worst decision that I could make. And I was like, fuck 'em. This will be this
Yeah.
like make it even
I'm a
more.
ham. You saw my confessionals. It's for the TV. It's for the TV.
It is
Yeah.
one of the benefits of being on DCP is that you do have that out of it's for TV.
It's the team TV.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
We always appreciate some good moments. So I mean, we can't really complain about it whatsoever, but it was well fought, Julia. I mean, to get to that point in the game, especially going from what was it, final eight all the way to final five, just not being able to be voted for is impressive unto itself. Of course, and even at final four, when it should be a very clear, let's get Julia out of here, you still manage to play the game enough to get that chance at sitting at the end. That being said, man, we really needed you as a final juror on this season because we got to get into final tribal council here, Joseph. And don't worry, I'm not going to defecate on you or your other finalists here, but man, nothing happened in that first part of that final tribal council. There were a bunch of questions coming, and there were some good ones, but it just was kind of the same beat repeated over and over again. And like it was the Beth happy to be at the end, didn't expect to be able to sit at the end, happy to be there. You had Richard going on about his perfect social game of not getting any votes the entire time. And you ended up emphasizing challenges so much to the point where multiple people told you, don't you dare say the word challenge anymore.
Yeah, thank you.
But then Julia comes up, and Julia, you give this bitch that shit speech to help motivate everyone. And It's like a brand new final tribal council when we get into the closing statements. So, first, I want to start, Joseph, going into this final tribal council. How are you thinking of approaching it sitting next to Richard and Beth?
Well, my hot take is that, and I said it a couple of times this season, winning individual immunity a lot during merge is a valid strategy to getting to the end.
Mhm.
But I kind of wanted to put a spin on it that I really believe that if I could show that it's more, winning immunity is more than just being safe. And if you don't do
Mhm.
anything with it, then it kind of goes to waste. And I really tried to articulate that. And I think that people weren't really receptive to it at that point because they were like, yeah, okay, we get it. You won a lot of challenges.
Mhm.
And I kind of tried to explain the same point several times over. And it didn't really, wasn't really working. And I kind of like didn't catch on either to that. They actually were like, actively like not listening to that part of it and like just
Mhm.
ignoring and not acknowledging and not like changing their way of thinking because like I can change the way they think about community challenge. He's walking in la da 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 da, and then like it's like a stand-up comic like going in with like thinking they have this amazing like revolutionary new set that no one has ever heard of, and then like it's just crickets.
Yeah.
That's what kind of like that's what it felt like. And it really wasn't until like Julia emboldened me. Um, that I kind of like found a way to like articulate myself a different way. And also there were some other questions like when JB asked, I still remember he's like, "Have you formed any genuine relationships?" And I was like, "Yeah." Julia went to Chipotle and then like Taco Bell or something. Like that was my answer to the question.
Yes, it was.
Oh no, it was so stupid. And like I'm thinking back now, obviously like months later about what I could have said. But I really was like really fatigued and a blur, and I actually had a bit of like a mental block with some of those questions. Um, I think future tip to anyone that participates in these, and this is a rookie error on my part, take fucking notes throughout the whole thing because like at the end I didn't have really many notes and I didn't know what the split votes were. I didn't know which votes I thought I actually had agency in where I actually made a tie, which I tried to say like, yeah, I tied some votes and then couldn't give any examples.
Mhm.
Um, so take notes. It helps, especially for someone like me that has a memory of like Dory in these kinds of things. That didn't really help either. So I think had I done that, maybe I might have set myself up to maybe explain things a bit better than I did because I really like. I'm happy to say that for 80% of that, I really did bomb, and it's just a learning experience. Then when I'm at my real actual final title council on the show, I will have learned and made that mistake and never have to do it again.
Amen.
Well, Julia, on the flip side of this, as a jury member, watching this tribal council go down before you actually do finally say something, what are you thinking? Like, who are you thinking going into this tribal council you were voting for? And did that remain consistent throughout, or was it changed after your jury speech?
Yeah, going in, I'm like, all right, I'm voting Joseph,
Mhm.
and like I'm calling it a day. Like, obviously, I'm going to hear these people out, but like I respect the game Joseph played. Like, he just sent me to fire, and then Joseph was talking. I'm like, oh God, I, I don't know if I can do it, man. I don't know if I can do it. I want to, and then he he flipped it around and started giving like what I knew he could. I'm like, all right, I'm good. Like this is the game that I want to have representing this season.
Which is
And
what?
that's what
What
I did
exactly
for
did
him.
you want representing the season?
I wanted someone who I felt embodied all three aspects of Survivor. Your outwit, outplay, outlast, who played the game to the fullest, who wasn't afraid to be loud, to speak his mind, to do things that weren't easy all the time. And I just respected the hell out of the game he played. And I'm glad, like, towards the end, he articulated that better.
Yeah, I have to commend you, Joseph, because what you do after Julia's speech is quite incredible because it's like a complete different person sitting there. It almost felt like you were a bit more scared. And I don't, knowing you, I don't think there was any fear in you whatsoever going into this final tribal council, but I think it presented that way a little bit.
Mhm.
And then at that point, you were just like, you know what, gloves off. I have been literally given permission, and I can just go for it. And despite the fact that you're given a 3 minute time limit for your final your ending statement there, you kill it in that process. And do create something very indicative this season, which is a tie vote for the last vote of the season.
Yeah, about that. I think what really helped from Julia is like I said, when I came into Tribal Council, I really kind of had like this weird agenda of like trying to change people's minds about viewing a challenge beast and that it's more than a one-dimensional
Mhm.
strategy. And I didn't really pick up that people weren't like viewing the shit that I was flinging on the wall. And they were like, okay, yep, that's fine. Um, and then I think kind of like what you said, Julie kind of like gave me permission to be free and say like, just talk about anything else other than a fucking challenge. And then when I kind of like just raised my mind about anything challenge related, I think I kind of had like, oh, there's actually things I could have drawn on, and maybe like had I had that revelation maybe 5 minutes earlier for some other questions, it could have helped.
Mhm.
But I'm glad that I didn't like completely bomb and I did finish somewhat strong. And I think that maybe if I didn't do that, we wouldn't have gone to a tie vote whatsoever.
And we couldn't have had that. We needed that to end this season. We needed our sixth tie vote of the season in order to perfectly encapsulate what Como Bluff truly was, this season of chaos. It
Mhm.
was unlike anything we've ever had in DCP. Honestly, it's probably unlike anything any org
Yeah.
or survivor game will ever have. It was a wild ride through and through. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Before we end up, we do need to do our after the snuff tradition. Julia, what is one word to sum up your game?
Chaos.
Joseph, the same question goes to you.
Revolutionary.
I love it. Fantastic. Both of you, super proud. So happy to have you as part of the DCP family. You absolutely delivered this season. It was an absolute joy. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Don't worry, I know the season's over. We still have a lot of postseason content coming out. We have secret scenes coming out tomorrow. Then on Saturday, we have the Ponderosa video. Then on Sunday, I have another episode of After the Snuff where I'm going to be talking to Beth and Richard. On Monday, you get to see the reunion. We're getting all of our Como Bluff castaways back together, and we'll see what type of chaos can come out of that. And then on Thursday, of course, you'll have the production draft update. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in all season long. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.
Before we go, John, can I just do a
Yes,
quick plug?
absolutely, Joseph.
Last year I was fortunate enough to run my own LRG here in the Cayman Islands, and Survivor Cayman Islands season one will be premiering either March 23rd or 24th. But follow Instagram, hashtag Survivor Cayman Islands. We're having a cast drop in the next couple of weeks. There'll be a trailer, and it looks pretty fucking good. I'm not gonna lie.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure to put the link to that Instagram account in the description of this video. Thank you once again so much. I mean, what a delight to have both of you on this season.
Thanks so much, John. It was a blast.
Thank you.